I felt lost. I can say I was a different person then than I am now. I think my ego was driving a lot of it. When you talked about how you were in that hole, that's the situation a lot of my clients are in by the time they come to me, which is why I think it's so important to talk about this because it can be easier if you get support. And maybe the support is a friend or some books that you read or a professional, a therapist or a coach. It can be a lot of different things. But I think knowing that this can happen, there's ways to get ahead of it. For me, it was a long journey in terms of understanding who I am at the core and what I want out of life. I started off throwing myself into work and throwing myself into my expat partner role like it was a job.
Welcome to International Love Story, the podcast about intercultural relationships. My name is Christina, and in today's podcast episode, I am going to welcome Linda. Linda is living in the US at the moment. She is an expat partner coach, which I find very interesting. And today's topic is mainly about identity crisis. Identity crisis is the second biggest topic I get frequently asked about directly after communication in an intercultural relationship. And I noticed I don't even have an episode yet that's only focusing on identity crisis. So I thought Linda is the perfect partner in crime for today's podcast episode to tackle this topic. Thank you so much, Linda, for being here today. Let's just dive directly into it. Who are you? What are you doing? Tell us all about you.
I love the partner in crime. I'm used to talking about expat partners, but today I get to take on a little different role. My name is Linda Müller, and I am the expat partner coach. I've decided to focus on that segment of coaching because my family made 7 international moves over 13 years. And in each case, I was the accompanying partner. It was quite a journey. So we have a lot to dig in on identity crisis. But before we get to that, let me tell you a little bit about my background so people can understand where I'm coming from and how I can relate to a lot of different situations. I'm a former corporate climber who was going to strike it big on her own. I was going to be in some high-powered executive position until I met a man I ended up marrying. His position took us to Tokyo twice, then to Abu Dhabi and to London. And in between, we bounced in and out of the US. And we're now living in Chicago, where we're not from. So to a certain extent, I had to start all over when we did repatriate here. So over those 13 years, I evolved from this corporate climber persona into a wife, a mother, which happened when we were living abroad. And now I can actually confidently say that I'm a repat because for many years, we were repatriating and then bouncing back out again. But we've been back for 8 years now. I'm a repat. And I'm really proud to say that I am living an international lifestyle in my passport country. And part of that is my business. I am a life coach and mentor to international women and other women in transition because that's what a globally mobile lifestyle is. It's all about one transition after another. I founded and now curate a group called International Women in Chicago. That's part of my strategy is to continue to surround myself with other people that have international interests and experience. In short, I'm a life coach, a mom, and a wife living in Chicago.
And you've moved abroad a couple of times as well, which is just I feel like you're a perfect guest for today's episode because as mentioned in the beginning, identity crisis. I'm sure you've your fair share of experience when it comes to that as well. So my first question would be, because you've mentioned that you moved to Japan, so you were quite career oriented, and then you met this man, and yeah, you sort of gave up your old identity, your old goals or your former goals, and you had to, I guess, reinvent yourself. So I'm wondering, how did that feel for you? The transition from building a life and then, yeah, basically starting from scratch again.
It was hard. Let's be honest. It was really hard because one thing that I left out of my introduction is that From the time I was 16, I started studying abroad. I studied abroad 3 times. I was an exchange student in the Netherlands, Norway, and France. I spent all of my free time traveling, and then I got an MBA and was traveling internationally for work. I was on these 2 and 3 week business trips all over the world. And that's when I met my husband. So our careers were parallel. And it was a big ask for him to say, what do you think about going to Tokyo? And it was like, I always say I was like the emoji where the head is exploding. Because on one hand, I had always wanted to immerse myself in another culture and live abroad, but I also was in my dream job in this very large international company. So I evolved into being an accompanying spouse, but like kicking and screaming and holding on to my corporate identity. I actually worked the first time we moved to Japan because I didn't have a child and I wanted to hold on to my career. So I was very fortunate to be able to work as a consultant for my company in the US and at the local subsidiary. But when we got there, they originally wanted to hire me as a local hire. And there was something inside of me that said, don't do it. You did not give up your dream job to then sit full time in a cubicle in Tokyo. I worked as a consultant, but I also, for the first time in my life, gave myself permission to just enjoy my circumstances. I started taking classes with other accompanying spouses, learning Japanese and traveling. I had these dual identities in my head. I still wanted to be the corporate executive, but I also was like thinking, oh, I have this amazing opportunity to immerse myself into the Japanese culture and take advantage of a husband that travels frequently. I can go with him on these trips. That really caused a lot of a conflict for me at certain points.
You went through a few transitions in your life, having a corporate identity and then changing it into another direction. This is also when you got self-employed, or when did you start changing your career? It was in Japan as well, right?
So I started my own consulting company instead of being a local hire. But while that was all getting formed, I remember sitting in my apartment with myself. Basically, there was nothing. Our container hadn't arrived yet. My husband had gone off 2 days after I arrived on a business trip. And I was sitting in this empty apartment, all the white walls. It hadn't really been cleaned very well. I just remembered saying to my husband before we moved, I just don't want to ever feel like we're stepping backwards in any way to have this experience. And I just remember sitting and thinking, this doesn't feel like home, and just starting to cry. Like the sun was setting, it was getting dark. I didn't know anybody in town. Again, my husband was away, and I just started crying. And I just thought to myself, what did I do? And I think this is a lesson for people because I was so wrapped up in wrapping things up in my job in the US, getting our household ready to move, the excitement of saying goodbye to everyone. And then I land and I don't have any friends. At this point, I knew I was going to have an opportunity with my company, but I didn't know what it was going to be or what I was going to do with it. And I panicked because I just thought, who am I? I don't even know when I go out and I meet people who to say I am, or I used to be, or I mean, I would go to work events with my husband and people would explain to me how hard he was working and how well he was doing in his job. Like I didn't understand any of that. That says everything about me and my mental state at the time. It doesn't say anything about these other people. So I had a lot of conflict. I, for the first time, was plucked out of my busyness. I had spent my whole life building my education, building my career, doing all the things I thought I should do. And then all of a sudden I was plucked out of all of that. And I had to look in the mirror at myself and I didn't know who I was or who I wanted to be. I was conflicted.
For how long were you conflicted? Out of my experience, it took me 6 months until figuring out what I want in the new country, who I am or who I can be actually as well, which is very exciting. But then it's also quite overwhelming, to be honest, because like leaving everything behind, starting something new just gives you great opportunities as well. But you really start questioning all your life decisions at some point and you're just like, what am I actually doing here? I had that moment of crying on the floor as well, feeling depressed. It just like felt like there's this deep hole and it's just soaking me in deeper and deeper, and I don't know anymore how to get out of it. So obviously I had the support of my husband, who acknowledged my challenges and who supported me in anything I was doing. But then part of myself also said, you have to figure it out yourself. So how was that for you, going on events with your husband and everyone just, or you feel like everyone talked about like how busy he is and what a great job he's doing. And then you see yourself as maybe just the wife. How did you feel in that moment, for example?
I felt lost. I can say I was a different person then than I am now. I think my ego was driving a lot of it. When you talked about how you were in that hole, honestly, that's how a lot of my clients, that's the situation a lot of my clients are in by the time they come to me, which is why I think it's so important to talk about this because it can be easier if you get support. And maybe the support is a friend or some books that you read or a professional, a therapist or a coach. It can be a lot of different things. But I think knowing that this can happen, there's ways to get ahead of it. For me, it was a long journey in terms of understanding who I am at the core and what I want out of life. I started off throwing myself into work and throwing myself into my expat partner role like it was a job. I was the organizer of all the events. I would meet people and say, hey, a group of us are doing this. Do you want to come? I was taking my relaxing expat partner role as another job. And that probably wasn't healthy. But what happened was I looked at it in retrospect as an experiment. So I played around with continuing to work and exploring the local culture. And it ended up merging because I was doing some volunteer work for the Run for the Cure Foundation in Japan, focused on raising breast cancer awareness. And it was great. We had these huge sponsors. I was working in sponsorships, liaising with companies, meeting a lot of people. And I kind of fell into doing business consulting for some of these local companies that wanted to break into the expat world. I loved it. And I realized that all of a sudden I thought, oh, you know what? Yes, I can have a career, but it doesn't have to be this corporate path. I had this idea, but I didn't know what to do with it because I still wanted to say that I had something going on other than just exploring Japan. So I started reading. This was in the early 2000s. So personal development opportunities weren't then what they are now, but I started reading every book I could get my hands on. And then I ended up finding a life coach. Really interesting back then, trying to find an English speaking life coach in Tokyo. But I found one and she had a huge impact on me. I mean, she just holding the space for me to say all the things that were floating around in my head. I felt like I had nobody who would understand them, allowed me to speak out loud. And hearing myself say these things allowed me to process them on a deeper level. And so then as ended up happening, I was fortunate in that my husband sounds very similar to yours in that he just wants me to be happy, wanted to be supportive, willing to listen as I played around with all these different ideas of things I could be doing. A lot of people don't have that. So that can be very difficult. I ended up figuring out what I wanted to do. And just at the time that I figured that out, my husband got the call from the company that it was time to move back to the US. That became a trend in my life. I can look back on my history, and every time I get clear on what I want the next chapter to be, we would end up moving. We moved 7 times internationally in and out of the US over 13 years. The first time it was 3.5 years. But after that, it started being like every year and a half, 2 years, we were moving, mostly unexpectedly. So that created a little bit of chaos.
Yeah.
The positive is I've moved abroad as a career person, as a new mom who's not working, as somebody that has her own business. I've had all these different experiences and they've all been an experiment. And sort of, I said I evolved from a corporate climber into an entrepreneur. And all of these experiences helped me to get clear on who I am as a person, what I want in my life, how I want to enjoy my experiences, and the mindset I need to make this all work.
So nowadays, how do you feel about a transition? If for some reason you have to leave the US again, is it something you are, I mean, relax is the wrong word, so I don't think anyone would take that easy going, but how would you react if your husband would be like, hey, shall we go back to Japan? Shall we try out Tokyo again? Or maybe somewhere in Europe? Is it something you would picture Or is it more like, okay, I've done that, I've been there, I'm happy to be in the US. This is where I would love to stay because this is where we have one daughter, right? Where we're raising our kid. So I don't want to live anywhere else for the next few years. So what's your status quo on this?
It's always complicated. So I think logistically, I'd say I've got this down. I know how to make it happen. I'm at a different life stage now. My daughter's in high school. She's not very interested in moving. Ideally, for the next 2 years, we stay put. But I think I'm actually in a much better position to pick up and move internationally now than I was when I was younger because I'm clear on who I am. I'm clear on how I like to spend my time, who I like to be surrounded by. And I also have a mobile business now. So, I mean, I can do what I do anywhere. And I feel like I'd be happy to pick up and move. Think that a lot of people that don't want to move, it's because they haven't gone through the work that I've done to get really clear on who I am. I think a lot of people that want to cling to the status quo, people have reasons, right? Family reasons or health reasons or whatever it may be. But I think when people are just afraid to move, a lot of times it's because they don't want to put the mirror in front of their face and have to say, like, who am I and what do I have to offer other people as I try to make friends and how am I going to spend my time and feel fulfilled?
So you think that's a big part of moving abroad and finding your new identity? Like, what do I have to present? Like, what do I have to offer in my romantic relationship, but also like the relationship with friends? Is that one question you're surrounded by often in the work you're doing?
I think it is because what I've seen of all these different years of coaching other people is that a lot of it comes down to confidence. When we're caught up in the busyness of our everyday, we're somebody's partner, somebody's mom, somebody's daughter, and we've got the things we've always done and a lot of them because we should be doing them. But when you're plucked out of your busyness and taken to this new environment, I think a lot of people start questioning, like, why would people want to hang out with me? What do I have to offer? All these other people seem to be having so much fun and doing all these different things together, and they already have friends. And here I am by myself. I think it really can bring up any insecurities that we have in a more dramatic sense than we maybe would have experienced them in our home country because we were just continually moving forward in a way that we thought we should or the way that we always had.
That's something I've never really thought about, to be honest. That is in the back of my head, what you've just described, taking over several roles. And in your case, it's the role of a mom, the expat, the friend. It's not only you as a person, but also who do I want to be in that different roles I'm playing in the new country I'm living in. So it is a lot, actually, if you think about it, if you really split it down to the core and you just be like, no wonder why I'm overwhelmed. And it's also like identity crisis, especially those who are moving abroad for the first time. You have the honeymoon phase, and then at some point, after a few weeks or months, it just goes down like this, and that's super normal. And one reason why you feel lost, yeah, you feel like you don't belong in the new environment and your new surrounding, is identity crisis. And I personally feel like a lot of expats or soon to be expats are not really preparing for. But I'm also asking myself the question, how do you actually prepare for something like this? It's a tricky question because in most cases, you don't know what to expect in your new home unless you've been there for a couple of weeks before, like you have an idea on what to expect in general. But then obviously it's also a difference between being in that country for 2 or 3 weeks and actually living there, making friends, having a social life. Those are like, you can't even compare it, in my opinion. So to get back to my question, how do you even prepare for something like this? It's a lot, and all the different roles you're playing in it.
I think what it really comes down to is compassion and a curiosity mindset in the early days, because no matter how much planning you do, you can't plan for everything. There's some luck involved. And then there's also what are the things that you can control and what are the things that you can influence and what are the things that are completely out of your control and what do you want to do about all of that? So I think if you go into it with a curiosity mindset, like this is just an experiment, nothing has to be forever, it helps because you've got the identity crisis and it's not really a crisis in the beginning, right? And you've got the culture shock. The identity issue may not be a crisis in the beginning. I've met plenty of people, and I've been this person at times, where you get to the new country and you're excited to be there, and you have your idea of, if you have children, I'm going to get the kids settled. I'm going to be the engaged mom. I'm going to get the whole family settled. I'm going to do whatever I have to do. And then sometime down the road, when the family you'd been hanging out with the most moves, and all of a sudden you don't have your partner in crime to do things with, it hits you, a year or two down. And then all of a sudden the identity crisis kicks in. Some people that are moving abroad and they don't really want to be going, the identity crisis starts before they leave, because they're thinking, what the heck is happening and what am I going to do? You might be like riding in your glory the whole first time you're living abroad, and then you transition to a new country and all of a sudden the identity crisis hits. So all that to say, it's so individual. But what I, in retrospect, did for myself, and what I now help other people do, is get really clear on who you are at the core, and what's, coaches like to talk about values, but really what is most important to you, and how do you want to be spending your time? Yes, you're going to be attached to other people. You may have important relationships back home that you need to spend time maintaining. You perhaps have a partner. Most of the people that you and I are talking about have a partner. There's these things, these people, these important aspects of your life that you want to focus on. But then I really encourage people to get clear on what they want for themselves as an individual, and to break through what they feel like they should be doing. I can't tell you how many people I met when I moved to Japan that said to me, if I were living in Japan, I'd be spending all my time getting fluent in Japanese. I actually took that, because I was still kind of in this what should I be doing mindset, that I kind of took that like, oh, well, should I be spending all my time learning Japanese? Well, no, because when I learned what that would actually take, I realized that's not how I wanted to be spending my time. It's really, in short, getting clear on who you are as a person, what's important to you, and how you want to be spending your time. Yes, set a few goals for yourself. I think that's always important, but maybe that for a fact, as much as you can know, that you're only going to be in a certain country for a certain amount of time because your partner's on a rotation. So you're going to leave every couple of years. You might just decide, here's what I want to take away from this experience. And it doesn't have to be a highfalutin goal. It could be, I'm now in a situation to spend more time with my children and my partner than I was when I had a job back in my home country. So that's what I want to do. I want to focus on creating memories with my family. Or it could be, I'm not able to work in this country, but I want to do some training so that when we move to the next place or back home, I grew my skills. Or it could just be, I want to take some time to take care of myself. It can be whatever is important to you at that point in your life. But I think that's really the key, is getting clear on who you are and what you truly want out of the experience.
What are the questions I would ask myself when it comes to, okay, who am I at my core? Because the question of who I am is a question 99% of the people are asking themselves constantly. Connected to identity crisis, how could that look like?
Well, what I tend to do with people is start to talk to them about times that they were happiest in their life, felt the most fulfilled. What were they doing? Who are the people or the activities that they're attracted to? I'll even suggest to people, if they say, what are some things that you've always wanted to try? And like, go try them, and be very cognizant of how do you feel when you're doing them? What do you enjoy about them? Or what topics interest you individually? I do think spending some time getting clear on your values, and there's a series of questions and exercises that you can go through to get clear on your values. And you can just look at a list of values and say, these are the ones that resonate with me. But what I think really helps is when you define them for yourself. Then what do they mean? Spend some time like letting them marinate as you go through your life, and get clear on which ones resonate with you and what they mean. Because I think a lot of times we pick our, what's the right word for it? Aspirational values. Like we say, family's important to me, helping others is important to me. All these things that we feel like we should be saying are important. Really, what is important to us as individuals? And you can do some reflections on how you live your life, because that will tell you what's important to you. If your aspirational values and your current values, how you're living your life, are not aligned, that's what creates the crisis. We're living one way and feeling like we want to live a different way, and that's the disconnect. For example, if you say family is important to you, but then you look at your calendar and realize you're spending all your time out partying with all your new expat friends, there's a disconnect because you're not spending time and energy focusing on your family. So it's a series of questions of like reflecting on how you spend your time, what's happened in your past, what you aspire to in the future, and then finding ways to right size those two things.
I especially love the question of what makes you happy or the moments you were the happiest. Because what I often, and I feel like that's also the pressure, especially women, unfortunately, have to deal with the pressure of society. Like, what could someone else, even though if it's a person I barely know, think about me? Is it actually appropriate in today's society to act a specific way or to put my values a different order than what or the way I grew up, for example? And it's just like, especially when you move abroad, at least this is how I feel, you can reinvent yourself again. And you are like further away from how you grew up and what you were taught as a kid, which obviously sticks to you. But then taking the time and taking this as an opportunity to break through and be like, yeah, but what do I want? What is it like? Me, Christina, where do I see myself? It's super, super overwhelming, but it's such a great chance to really from afar get into this perspective of looking on yourself and just be like, okay, that's maybe my past self. And now I can just take bits of what I liked or the moments I were happy or what makes me happy and take that with me. And then also take new parts for me and again, reinvent myself. And yes, it's overwhelming. If you're brave enough, it's such a great tool to really make sure that whatever you're doing, you do it with fulfillment and with happiness. It sounds a little bit cheesy. That's just my experience. And that's actually something I'm still working on. I think the work will never be done. I constantly ask myself, what am I doing? Who do I want to be? Especially now that we're in Buenos Aires. But having the ability of doing so is just such a great gift, in my opinion. Yes, it's overwhelming, but it's also very rewarding. How was your journey when it comes to that once you've learned who you are and what you want as a person?
I think it's exciting, freeing. I think it gives you the confidence that when you're secure with who you are, there's always the light in the dark of everything. And some of the things that I think we're all our own worst critic. If we get a little more self-compassion into our lives, then we can just be forgiving of, there's a great Maya Angelou quote about, it's often said that it's misquoted, but basically the gist of it is, do as well as you can until you know better and then do better. And I think, like you said, the journey's not ending. It's not ended for me either. I started out as a business coach because I thought I should be a business coach because I have to tell people I have an MBA. Now I don't even care. Although I just told you and your listeners, I do have an MBA. But at one point, it was like, no, I don't have to be a business coach. I was doing way more general life coaching with my business clients because they were all entrepreneurial accompanying partners. And I was doing much more general life coaching with them than business coaching in the end, because that's what was really holding them up. It wasn't the business issues. So I think you brought up a really good point about happiness, and as a life coach, I would push back on, okay, well, how do you define happiness for you? Because it's different for everyone. For me, one aspect of happiness is being very connected with other people. I thrive with the give and take. Other people, me time. Somebody might say, oh, like somebody like me would be like, oh, are you lonely? And another person would say, no, I'm very happy when I have a lot of time on my own to just process and reflect and do what I want to do on my own. So happiness is different for all of us. And that's why this whole issue of identity crisis, it's so individual. It's going to hit at a different time. It's going to mean something different to everyone. When you brought up the point of the lifelong journey, we need to have this curiosity mindset as we experiment and be aware of how things make us feel, how we respond, what triggers us. Having that awareness is so empowering, because then, and if you're getting clear on your values, you can say, you know what, that doesn't fit me. You can start to use your values as a filter for how you spend your time and what you agree to do. I think a lot of us, when we move abroad, we don't lack opportunities to do things because everything's so new, especially in the beginning. It's more of, what do we want to do? Having the awareness is empowering, and just having a curiosity mindset, looking at your situation as an experiment and knowing that you can always shift, I think is very empowering.
That's definitely what I would have liked to add to this. But you've explained it perfectly already. Only because you've made a decision doesn't mean that you have to stick to it. You can always change the path and explore other parts of yourself. And it's just interesting how you can having the capacity or the ability of turning a crisis into an opportunity. And this is how I like to see it. And I feel like you're also guiding your clients into that direction. So I'm wondering, when you think about the clients you are supporting, what life situations are they usually? You've mentioned it's very personal as well, and not always the case when you just moved abroad. It can also come before you leave the country again. When you think about your clients, and what moments do they mostly deal, without obviously stereotyping, but with identity crisis?
For me, it's people once they're in their host country and the newness has worn off and they feel like they've tried everything they can on their own, then they reach out for help. My favorite clients are ones that have gone through therapy, because I'm not trained to be a therapist. I often work with clients that are in therapy or have gone through therapy, because a lot of things that would have stayed squashed down in our busy lives rise to the surface when we're abroad. And like we were talking about earlier, where you're just all of a sudden by yourself and you're looking in the mirror, who am I, or what have I experienced? This was hard in my life and I never really processed it. But I do think that most of the people that I've been working with are people that the newness of the excitement of the international experience has worn off, and they've realized that they want something different. And most of them don't even know what's wrong. Like, they don't know what they want. So it can take us time, because it's like they're trying to figure out who they are and what's important to them. Many of my clients who have a family, for the first 3 sessions, every question I ask them, how do you enjoy spending your time? Well, my kids like going to the beach, so we go to the beach. Or my husband likes golfing, so we go golfing. And I'm like, no. What do you like to do? So it's a bit of a process of just getting women, I've coached men, but the majority of my clients are women, to just accept that it's okay to think about themselves, and to realize that they deserve to treat themselves as an individual, even though they're often the linchpin, like in a extended family situation.
This is what happened to me right after the excitement wore off. I was just asking myself all those questions. I'm also quite open-minded, especially on Instagram. This is where I share most of my experience. If anyone who's listening or who's watching knows the feeling of the dark hole, not knowing how to get out of there anymore, I think we both can ensure them it will pass eventually. And there's help if you feel like you'll not be able to drag yourself out of there by yourself. Which leads me to the next question. You've shared a little bit about your work, about what you're doing. What is it exactly? How do you work with your clients? And what else is there you would recommend to anyone who's going through a very difficult phase after moving abroad, or the feeling of, I don't know who I am anymore, I don't know what I want?
Well, I think one of the key things is to always keep hope, because one of the signs of depression is when you've lost hope. Know that there is a solution and that things will get better. Anyone that's listening to this right now feeling stuck, take action. Even one small little bit of action can turn your day around. Call the person you met at a group event and see if they want to have a coffee. Get up and go for a walk. Smile at people as you're walking around. Stop and get a coffee. Say hello to the person that's serving you the coffee. Little things like that, just that action and connecting with other people, can really turn your mood around. I'm a big fan of therapy. So I think everyone at some point in their life can benefit from therapy. So there's therapists out there that specialize in expats, globally mobile people, people living an international lifestyle that really understand the situation you're in. Because I think that's one thing that happens when people fall into an identity crisis is that they call their friends back home and they don't really understand the situation. Even though they love you and they care for you and they know you, they don't really understand the situation you're in. And then a lot of times people, when they're in a new environment, they don't feel comfortable being very open and honest with people they don't know that well. So that's where a therapist or a coach can come in handy because they create this safe space for you to process your thoughts and to get ideas about, how to move forward in a productive manner. There's so many good books out there that people can read too. There's one book that I'll recommend by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey, but it's called What Happened to You. Have you read this book?
No, not yet, but it's interesting that you're mentioning it. I've been recommended this book before, yes.
Well, I put off reading it for a while, to be honest with you, because I thought it was just another celebrity book, but it kept popping up. So I finally listened, and it's all about how what happens to us as children impacts who we are as an adult. And it doesn't mean you had to come from an awful childhood. It's just the experiences we have. I mean, you could be sitting in class and some silly classmate can say something mean to you and it can stick with you. So it's all about how trauma with a big T and trauma with a little t impacts who we are moving forward. I think reading books like that can give you some insight into what limiting thoughts you have that you can try to start to turn around. I'm a big fan of Mel Robbins. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown. There's a lot of really good books. And so you had asked me what my journey was, and that's what happened. I started experimenting with different activities and paying attention to like what I was really enjoying. I made a lot of mistakes along the way, believe me. I learned from those, some more quickly than others. And I did a lot of reading. And I still do. Like you said, the journey never ends. I'm still always looking for a good personal development book or seminar to do. I think, take action, don't give up hope. Look for books that resonate with you. If you start to think about what may be an issue for you, if you're noticing something in life is triggering you more than other things, dig into what that is and why it may be. If you feel like you don't have anyone to talk to or need somebody that's a trained professional, look into coaching or therapy because there's always a solution. For me, it started with just getting aware that I wanted to make changes or that I didn't really like how things were. And then number two was the self-study. And then I moved into hiring a coach and then I went into therapy and it's been a journey and I love it. And you may be able to relate to this. Every conversation I have with a client teaches me something about myself. I'm thinking maybe it's similar for you as you're interviewing people about their own journeys. It probably helps you reflect on your own experience. I've listened to quite a few of your episodes and I've learned from each of them. So I think that might be something that helps you on your journey as well.
It does, because it's always like, obviously I'm traveling with them, going through their emotions, but also their learnings, even though I didn't make the same experience, but they help me as tools in other situations. It's actually very interesting. For example, I'm not a very patient person. So for me, if I picture something like where do I see myself in the next 6 months or in 1 year, I try to work hard on that goal. And it's quite difficult for me to take it piece by piece, step by step, making mini steps instead of seeing the big goal, just seeing the small steps in between. And every time I'm talking to other couples in intercultural relationships or experts like you, I remind myself, listen, for example, if it's a couple that just started dating 2 or 3 years ago, I'm like, wow, we have been there already. We have done this. And 10 years later, we're at a different stage of our life where we have different priorities. We've overcome this. Isn't this amazing? I start reflecting. I'm just like, I have no idea sometimes how we even got here, but we got here. And then others, when interacting, they're reminding me how far we've come. I mean, obviously, I'm not comparing, but it's just like oftentimes it's a very nice reminder where I'm just like, their journey is beautiful, the stage they're in. So they have so much to look forward to because I know exactly how it feels like and what's going to happen next in a different way, especially when it comes to closing the distance. We have been there and we've done this, and now we're taking steps further, So it feels like, okay, it's overwhelming, but I know we can make it. I just love that because not only am I able to share our experience and my experience, but I'm also able to soak in all the information I get, all the experiences of other couples, using the tools they teach me in the conversations, using them in the future or on different aspects of my life, but also being reminded that we've come quite far as a couple, but also me as an individual. And that's also something I would like to add to this conversation, because I feel like one thing, if you feel like you're lost alone, what helped me a lot is, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult, especially if you don't know who you are or what you want, to make that step and to go out and socialize and look for a community. I know it's super difficult if you're just questioning everything, but I constantly force myself, even though if I don't feel it in that very moment, to really seek a community and build a community around me, leading to a point where, for example, here in Buenos Aires, I have so many friends. We are hanging out every weekend during the week. I go out at least 3 times a week, and I'm an introvert. I'm mentioning this quite often as well. So I'm not the person who's just like, oh, here am I. But I realize for me, what helps me is to know that there are people out there that have made similar experiences, and also people I can turn to if I have like creating my own safe space in a new world in a way, you know. And I know you're doing the same, and you've done the same, and you're doing awesome community work as well. That would also be one of my biggest advice, even though I know how hard it is. You don't feel like that at all, but try to get out. If it's only like for coffee, try to step out of your comfort zone. It's easier said than done, but it will be so worth it, especially on the long run, when you have a few people in your new home you could turn to that share your experience. Because it's always, and you've mentioned that as well, it's always a little bit difficult to explain your situation, your feelings towards someone you at home you grew up with, for example, because they know a different person and you might act around them as a different person. You automatically jump, my experience again, you jump back into role. And then you're just like, I don't feel comfortable in that role anymore, but I know that the person I'm interacting with, it's a friend I know since 15 years. She only knows me like this, so I stick to that role. Does it make sense? It's very tricky. It's very tricky. So having a community who really gets what you're thinking, how you're feeling, you don't have to explain yourself, and you're just like, yes, it's the same for me. I've done this. Do you need anything? Shall we just go out? Can I get your mind off of things? Really supporting each other. What I've learned is, even though the roles you're playing in your life, the different roles, it can be quite energy taking in a way. But then I've also made experience that, for example, going back to the situation with your friend, that at some point you realize they don't have to understand how you're feeling. It's okay if they don't understand. My parents, they have no idea what I'm doing. They have no idea what my profession is. They have no idea what I'm building, like the whole community thing I'm working on, helping others. I'm also studying becoming a therapist right now. They don't have to know, you know? So it's okay. That's at least my biggest learning of the past 12 months being in Buenos Aires since 1 year. Now I'm getting off topic. I'm so sorry, but once I start talking, I'm just like getting so emotional. I just want to get it all off my chest.
Here's so many good points. I mean, one of the points is that everybody does have a different personality. So if you're more introverted, I mean, I've had people say to me, well, I'm not going to call a person, that's not my style. So what I would recommend to them is think about how you like spending your time and go do that activity, because that'll put you with other people that have similar activities. Do the activity or take a class or a seminar where you'll be around people that share your interests, because that can also overcome if there's language issues. If you're doing something that doesn't require a lot of talking, then you can still sort of get the vibe of different people just by being with them and doing this activity. And then as your language skills get better, or you find other ways to communicate, it still is bringing that interaction and connection into your life. There's not one solution for everybody, but there is a solution for everybody. I need to take one little action. You don't have to step out of your comfort zone 100% every day, but push yourself 10% each day and see where that gets you. Because the action is really what builds progress. I like that you said that you celebrated along the way, because a lot of us are so goal oriented that we don't allow ourselves to celebrate until we reach the end point. And even then, a lot of us say, what's the next goal, and keep going. Some days when you're living in another country, just getting to the grocery store and getting all the things that you need on your list home, it's like, that's a victory, right?
I've done that 10 weeks ago. I'm like, yay, my Spanish is good enough. I'll survive. I did grocery shopping on my own.
It's just that's one thing I do as a coach as well, is like really help my clients celebrate the small victories, because we're so hard on ourselves and we're making all of this so much more difficult. We all are. I'm telling you what I used to do. I used to just make it all so much more difficult than it needed to be. But, just living your life, wake up and, have a coffee. Last summer, we were supposed to go on vacation somewhere with some friends from Tokyo, and it didn't work out. And I was upset. And I woke up that morning and I said, you know what? It's a sunny day. One of the things I like about this place we were supposed to go is that we sit outside together in the morning and we drink our coffee in the sunshine. I was like, get yourself out to the back and sit in the sun and drink your coffee at your own house. I just switched my mindset around. If we're walking around life looking for negative things, we're going to have a negative opinion. But if we're walking around looking for the little wins or the friendly smile from somebody else, that's what we're going to remember, and that's what we're going to absorb. Having a positive mindset doesn't mean that you're just walking around saying everything's great, but you can be looking for the positives in your life, because there's always a silver lining. There's always something, even if it's the smallest thing that goes well each day. The more we focus on those things, the more it helps shift how we feel about life and our situation.
Yeah, 100%. Everyone who's listening or watching, it's also okay to have a shitty day, to feel like I'm not gonna get up, and not getting up. It's also totally fine. Whatever you feel, however you feel, all feelings are valid. Just to mention this, because I feel like, especially in the times of social media, there's a way I don't really support, which is toxic positivity, I think it's called, where you have to feel great every day. No, you don't. You can have weak moments, and you can soak in those weak moments as long as you get up the next day and kick asses again, or get help when you feel like you're in a situation where you not be able to manage yourself. There are so many experts on different fields out there, therapists. There are so many communities, online, offline communities. So whatever it is you need, seek help. But then again, you can have a bad day and it's totally fine as well.
Right. I have my own share. You can be a trained therapist, a trained coach, so many different things, but it doesn't mean your life is perfect or that you have the answer for everything. It's sort of like they say to cobblers, kids have the worst shoes. Sometimes we have the skills, but we're not good at using them for ourselves, which is, not, it's important to step back and take care of ourselves. One of my biggest things is self-care. A lot of people think self-care is going and getting a manicure or a massage, but self-care is getting to the doctor regularly, getting exercise, getting natural sunlight, getting enough sleep. These are things that we often, as women, especially busy women, put aside. It's really what builds the foundation for happiness. When we are healthy and in a good mindset, everything else will fall into place because you have the energy to make it happen.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us. And to get back to your work, what is it you're offering? So everyone who is listening or watching today, who can relate to the topics we've been talking about, what's the best way to contact you, and what exactly are you offering?
Sure. The best way to contact me is my website, expatpartnercoach.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook with the same handle, the Expat Partner Coach. What I'm offering is life coaching. I have programs that start at 6 weeks, and it could be general life coaching. If you come to me and say, I feel stuck, I don't know what's going on, we can work through that. I also have a program for people going through transition, like moving abroad or moving to a new country after already living abroad or moving back home. We go through more of a 6-week process that hits the highlights of the typical things that people experience when they're going through those experiences. If you're a woman in or from Chicago, I have international women in Chicago, and we just found out that we were the first runner-up in the Best of Chicago survey on best communities in Chicago. So I'm very excited about that. Reach out. I'm also happy to just have a chat if you're feeling stuck. I always tell people that call me for an introductory call, talk to a couple different coaches, maybe consider therapy instead. Like with coaching and therapy, a lot of it is fixed. So if we talk and I don't think we're a good fit or you don't think we're a good fit, I know a bunch of other coaches with different niches that I can refer people to. I'm always happy to do that.
Thank you so much for sharing this. Linda is obviously going to send me all the links where to find her. So I will add them to the description of the video as well as to the side notes of the podcast. One last question before we end the conversation. Out of your experience, your journey, what is your number one biggest advice if you could choose one?
Have faith in yourself that you can figure it out and be patient with yourself while you do so.
Thank you so much. Perfect ending. I really enjoyed our conversation. I know that this topic is a very, very important topic. Also, again, most frequently asked topic within my community of intercultural dating and moving abroad. The experience I've made, I personally see the urge in tackling identity crisis in depth. If you would like to know more about Linda, you know where to find her now. And yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me directly via Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, YouTube. It's International Love Story. Feel free to contact Linda as well if you need some in-depth advice, if you need professional support. Thank you so much for being my guest today, Linda. It was so great to talk to you and to finally make a whole podcast episode on identity crisis. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for the work that you do with the international community.
Thank you so much for listening and or for watching to today's podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you would like to tell your love story as well, you will find a link below in the side notes and in the description. And as always, you will find their contact details below as well. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube and leave a 5-star review if you're listening on Spotify, on Google Podcasts or anywhere else. This would help me a lot because I invest a lot of time, a lot of energy into this podcast. And I want to make sure that I reach a wider audience within the community, and you can help me with that. If you would like to be part of the community, I have 2 communities. One is online, where women in intercultural relationships share their advice, they're supporting each other. The other one is on site here in Buenos Aires. And yeah, in case you're living in Buenos Aires or you're just here to visit, definitely check it out. You will find it below as well. With this being said, have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are right now, and take care. Bye.